So 2024 is almost at an end, and at the time of recording, it's Christmas, and by the time I get this video out, it might already be 2025. So I thought I'd just take some time to look back on the year in movies that was 2024. Now, before I continue with the video, if you like movie and anime content, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Anyway, back to the video. Now, 2023 was a great year for movies. The phenomenon that was Barbenheimer came out in 2023, Across the Spider-Verse came out that year, and some other great movies came out in 2023. As for 2024, I don't feel it was as good as 2023 was for movies, but there definitely were some movies that really stood out. So to take a look back and walk down memory lane, I thought I'd take a look at the movies that I've watched this year, some of which I've even made reviews of on this channel, and see how I feel about them now. So one of the earliest films I watched this year was Argylle, Matthew Vaughn's latest film starring Henry Cavill and Bryce Dallas Howard, and safe to say, it was a very strange experience watching this film. Matthew Vaughn is known for his catalog, including Kingsman, The Kingsman. I think he did Kick-Ass as well, so he is a good director who's put out some good stuff before, but Argylle feels like it's not very well balanced. It is a movie with a ton of twists, but a ton of twists that you see coming pretty much from the start of the movie. It didn't really do well at the box office, so I don't know what's going to happen with this series going forward, whether there will be a sequel, whether it will tie into The Kingsman, because there was, spoilers, there was an end credit scene that sort of ties this into Kingsman, but yeah, it was a really confused film that didn't really know what it really wanted to do, and it had a lot of twists, and it was a little bit too absurd. Even by Matthew Vaughn standards, it was a bit too absurd for my liking. So moving along further in the year, there was some action flicks that I managed to catch, especially during that end of spring towards summer season, and one of them was Bad Boys Ride or Die. So Bad Boys Ride or Die is the fourth installment in the Bad Boys franchise, and it's safe to say that these movies have found sort of a pocket in which they can play in, and that is heavily reliant on the chemistry between Martin Lawrence and Will Smith. Without them, these movies, well, wouldn't exist because they wouldn't be Bad Boys, but they are the ones that are carrying these movies, and they're the reason why people go back to cinemas to watch them. These movies are not meant to be taken seriously, but they're just a good time in cinemas, and I can see why a lot of people actually watched this movie. Another action movie that I wish got as much love as Bad Boys was Furiosa. Furiosa is a prequel to Mad Max Fury Road, and it follows Furiosa's story and how she ended up where she did in Mad Max Fury Road. Furiosa was directed by George Miller, the guy who directed the previous Mad Max movies, and I feel like it didn't get as much love as those movies, and that may be down to the kind of toxic social media culture which we are trapped in these days, but it is actually an incredible action film. The CGI can put you off, but Anya Taylor-Joy does a commendable job as Furiosa. But the shining light in that movie will always be Chris Hemsworth playing Dementus, because you can see he's really having fun with this movie. It's an incredibly good time. It's almost as good as Mad Max Fury Road, but again, the CGI kind of puts it off, and it kind of jumps the shark a little bit. But if you haven't watched Furiosa, I would recommend you go check it out, especially if you are a fan of the entire Mad Max franchise, because I feel like the tone of Furiosa is true to the franchise. And finally, the last action film I will talk about in this video is Monkey Man. Monkey Man was a film that overcame so many odds. It was supposed to just be a Netflix film. It was not supposed to get a theatrical release. In fact, there were so many problems during production that this movie might not have been released at all. Thankfully, Jordan Peele had the foresight to buy the movie from Netflix and release it in the cinemas, because this is Dev Patel's directorial debut, and he does an incredible job. This is basically Indian John Wick. There are many layers to this movie, especially when it comes to the cinematography, and I'm going to spoil a few things about the cinematography because it follows this character who is seeking revenge for the murder of his mother, and he, unlike John Wick, who is a trained assassin, this boy does not know how to fight, and he has to learn. And every fight sequence that takes place in this movie, it starts off with shaky cam because he's inexperienced, and as he gets better, the camera becomes more and more steady to the point where the action mirrors something that you would get in John Wick. This is a great first movie as a director for Dev Patel, and it is one of the best action movies of the year. Speaking of monkeys, monkeys had a big year this year. We had Big Monkey versus Big Lizard in Godzilla vs. Kong. And we also had Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, the fourth installment in the rebooted Planet of the Apes franchise. Again, Godzilla vs. Kong or the Monsterverse, similar to Bad Boys, has kind of found the sort of pocket in which it can play in where it leans into how ludicrous the whole world is, and it's just having fun with itself at this point. We're not going here for highbrow entertainment. We're here to see a big monkey punch a big lizard, and then they team up to punch another big monkey. And that is what we're here for. They did it in the previous movie, they do it now, and they know where the focus is supposed to be. Whereas Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes takes us hundreds of years since the passing of Caesar and shows us how this Planet of the Apes has changed, how the world has changed, and how the legacy of Caesar can be twisted and used to manipulate other apes and control them. And that is what the main villain of this movie does. But it also shows how legacy can be lost because Noah, the main character for this movie, doesn't even know who Caesar is. He's in such a secluded community that he has never heard of Caesar. It is only when he encounters a human and these apes from outside start invading that he starts learning about the legacy of Caesar in the greater world of apes. So yeah, Godzilla vs. Kong is just a good time if you're looking to have fun, whereas Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is a worthy addition to the Planet of the Apes franchise. You can stop with the last Planet of the Apes movie, but if you just want to see how the world has changed, I would recommend giving Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes a chance. When it comes to animation, on the other hand, I only watched one movie in cinemas, which was Inside Out 2. And I've done a review on Inside Out 2, and I feel like Inside Out 2 is a pretty good sequel to Inside Out. It tackles new and different problems, and we have these new emotions that Riley has to deal with. And I think it handles them in a tasteful way, and it shows what a young girl may be going through at that stage of life. So yeah, while Disney Pixar sequels have been kind of hit or miss, I feel like Inside Out 2 is a solid hit for them. Surprisingly, what I didn't expect to have a big year at the movies, for me personally, are horror films. And while there were some great horror films released this year, there are three that come to mind when I think of the horror thriller genre. The first one, fittingly, being The First Omen, which follows a nun in training who goes to Rome to eventually take her vows to become a nun. And usually when it comes to established franchises like The Omen, like The Exorcist, these prequels or sequels tend to be a bit of a letdown because they're trying to force it, or they're trying to capture the lightning in the bottle that they will never be able to. But The First Omen, I feel, is a solid addition to the Omen franchise. It might have some of the horror elements that you are looking for, but for me, it has the most important element of a horror movie, which is having that sort of anxiety-inducing situation where you are ready to jump at the next scare. Also, I feel like all good horror movies have a plot or a sense of mystery around the story that's happening, and The First Omen definitely does. The next movie I want to talk about actually came up on streaming, and it is Late Night with the Devil. The moment I heard about this movie, I knew I wanted to watch it. It is a very cool concept because it follows a late night TV host whose ratings are dwindling, and so in a last salvo, a last hurrah to try and save his show, he brings on guests that are related to the supernatural during a special Halloween episode. And by doing that, it causes a lot of supernatural things to happen on the TV show. And this is presented in a found footage style of film where people are finding the footage from this specific episode of the show. David Desmalkin stars as the lead in this movie, which is Jack Delroy, the host of this talk show, and he is incredible in this movie. He carries this movie on his shoulders, and it's finally nice to see him get some love in a leading role. The final movie I want to talk about when it comes to the horror segment is Longlegs. So Longlegs follows the story of this FBI investigator who kind of has this special talent of knowing where people are or where the criminals are or how things are going to happen. I don't remember exactly his special talent, but she does have this special talent, and she's trying to solve the mystery of this serial killer named Longlegs because the way he kills his victims is unknown. Nobody can figure it out, and she's brought in because she has this special talent. And for me, this is one of the best horror/thriller movies of the year because it has one of the best things, as I mentioned, about horror movies, which is that sense of tension, that sense of anxiety that it fills you with, and it keeps you on the edge of your seat, worried where the next scare is going to come from. And Longlegs does that beautifully. On top of that, you have this investigation, which is the mystery that plays into the plot, and combining those two aspects, you have a very, very intriguing film which keeps you focused throughout the entire movie. You are not taking your eyes off the screen. So if you're into horror/thriller and you've not seen Longlegs, I recommend you check it out, because in addition to the things I've talked about, we also have Nicolas Cage in this movie giving a completely unhinged performance, and who doesn't like that? And then we have comic book movies for this year, and there were only 2 that I watched in cinemas, and that was, of course, Deadpool vs. Wolverine, which is one of the best post-Endgame MCU movies. It is a lot of nostalgia bait, but it's nostalgia bait that works for me, someone who watched superhero movies in the 2000s, before the dawn of the MCU, before, you know, The Dark Knight was a big thing. And yeah, to be able to have these nostalgia nuggets in the movie while also being a pretty fun and entertaining movie on its own is a big plus. And the other movie I watched in cinemas based on comic book characters this year was Joker Folie à Deux. And Joker Folie à Deux, I don't know what its legacy will be. Some people will say this is going to be a classic in the future, and some people say this is an utter trash fire. And I feel like this movie is really, as I mentioned in my review, is much ado about nothing. We go along with the plot, and this movie is a musical with a ton of musical segments, which would work if only Joaquin Phoenix could sing well. Most of the vocal talent is brought by Lady Gaga, and I feel like it's only a musical because she's in the movie. But yeah, it is much ado about nothing, because towards the end of the movie, it feels like the past 2 Joker movies have been pointless. So if you've enjoyed the first Joker movie, I recommend you not watching this one. But speaking of musicals, I'm not a musical person. I don't think I enjoy musicals that much, but this year, one musical really gave me a good time, and that was Wicked Part 1. Who knew that a musical starring Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo, 2 people with massive egos, would be a movie that entertained me? But I've read the original Wizard of Oz, and I enjoyed the original Wizard of Oz book, and being able to spend some time in an expanded version of this world is like Harry Potter meets Wizard of Oz, sort of. And yeah, just seeing how these characters come to be and seeing them in a different light is really entertaining, and the musical segments were really fun. It's like when I watch those musical segments, I wonder how they were shot. So thank God for Wicked Part 1 for saving musicals, because if Joker Folie à Deux is what we have for a mainstream big musical movie, they would be doomed. I'm not seeing the play because I don't live anywhere near which has the Wicked play. I've not read the books, so yeah, I am looking forward to the next part of Wicked. Also today I just watched Sonic 3 and it was really fun. Keanu Reeves as Shadow, he does what Keanu Reeves does, but it fits the characters so well. And yeah, it's another movie, another franchise that kind of has found its space in what it needs to do to be entertaining and to draw in crowds and to entertain the people who buy a ticket to this movie. So yeah, it's been a pretty fun year in movies. Not as great as 2023, but pretty solid on its own. I feel like, especially towards the end of the year, there were very few movies that made me want to go and watch them. You know, there was Gladiator 2, I couldn't be bothered. It did feel like a very sparse year for movies. But of course, there was one movie this year that was better than all the movies I have seen this year, and I've not mentioned it yet, and you could probably guess which one, and I think it's the same for a lot of people, and that was Dune Part 2. So Dune Part 2 lives up to the hype. We've been waiting for this movie since we found out that Dune was going to be split into 2 parts, and from the incredible world of Arrakis to the acting from Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, Javier Bardem, this movie is incredible. The cinematography alone is worth the price of admission, but you're getting a great story here, especially if you love Part 1. It is so beautiful to watch. Watched it in IMAX. It is definitely the movie of the year for me, and I hope to see it win some awards at next year's Oscars. Anyway, that's it for me and my year in movies. Please let me know how your year in movies has been this year in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.